My parents didn't show up on our baby shower. When I called, he whispered, "I'm at the hospital." But not for you. I'm meeting my real family. His mom then said, "She always looked like the backup plan." I dropped my phone in shock. 3 days later, at the birth announcement event, the whole crowd turned silent as I unveiled the surprise guest. I'm Clara, 37, from Rochester, New York. My soon-to-be ex, my husband is Nolan, 39. We've been married for 6 years, together for 7. We had a slow burn kind of love. Steady, comforting, and unremarkable in a good way. We met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner at a pub in Syracuse, and things unfolded naturally from there. He was quiet, kind, thoughtful, someone who seemed solid. He never raised his voice, always remembered anniversaries, cooked dinner on my stressful work days. The kind of man people describe as reliable. But now I realize there's a difference between being reliable and being present. He was physically there for most of our marriage. Emotionally? I'm not so sure anymore. We struggled to get pregnant. When it finally happened, after years of quiet trying and a few tearful nights, I was ecstatic. Nolan smiled and hugged me when I told him, but something in his eyes looked off. I chalked it up to nerves. His mother, Eloise, never liked me. I don't say that lightly, I genuinely tried. I cooked her favorite meals. I bought her a nice shawl for Christmas one year. I sent birthday cards. But she always treated me with thin politeness, like I'd taken a spot that belonged to someone else. My parents, Joanne and Philip, weren't much warmer. They've always been distant people, private, not cold, but not the warm and fuzzy kind either. We're not a hugging family. They love me in their own way, but it's always been reserved. Still, I expected them to show up to the baby shower. I mean, it was their first grandchild. The shower was on a Saturday afternoon, mid-October, at my best friend Darla's place. She has this charming home in the Finger Lakes, nestled between vineyards and apple orchards. Everything was decorated in soft browns and oranges. Cider simmered on the stove. Baby clothes were strung up on twine like bunting. The whole place smelled like cinnamon and comfort. People started arriving around noon. Friends from college, co-workers, even some distant cousins. Everyone brought gifts and warm wishes. Everyone except my parents and Nolan. I kept glancing at the door, waiting. I checked my phone repeatedly. Nothing. Darla offered to call them, but I wanted to do it myself. I finally stepped away to the guest bedroom and called Nolan. He answered after a few rings, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm at the hospital." My heart dropped. "What? Why? Are you okay?" He took a breath. "Not for you. I'm meeting my real family." For a second, I thought I misheard him. I waited for him to say he was joking or explain what he meant. But the line went dead. I called again. Voicemail. I tried my parents. Voicemail. Finally, I called Eloise. She answered immediately. "I knew this day would come," she said flatly. "What are you talking about? You were always the backup plan, Clara. He needed stability. You gave him that. But she's his real family now." Click. I dropped my phone. Literally. It clattered to the hardwood floor. I stood there staring at it like it would explain itself. My stomach churned. The baby kicked. I couldn't breathe. Darla came in minutes later and found me sitting on the edge of the bed, hands trembling. I told her what happened. Her face went pale, but she held it together better than I did. She walked out to the living room and gently told everyone there was an emergency and that the party was over. I don't remember much of the cleanup. I just remember sitting there, surrounded by unopened gifts and pastel wrapping paper, wondering what I'd done to deserve this. I tried not to think about it over the next few days. That's a lie. I couldn't not think about it. I tried calling Nolan, my parents, Eloise, nothing. It was like I'd been erased. 3 days later, I went into labor. Alone, except for Darla. It was a quiet Monday morning. I woke up at 4 a.m. with contractions and panic. Darla drove me to Highland Hospital. She stayed with me through everything, held my hand, read my birth plan, argued with the nurse when they tried to push me toward a C-section I didn't want. Nolan never showed up. Neither did my parents. Not even a message. My daughter, Juniper Rose, was born at 1:37 p.m. She was 7 pounds 6 ounces, and the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And she was born into a storm of silence. I had scheduled a small birth announcement event ahead of time. It was supposed to be a celebration, a simple picnic-style gathering at the Rochester Botanical Garden. I nearly cancelled it, but Darla convinced me to go through with it. "You need to reclaim this moment," she said. So I went. I wore white. I held Juniper in my arms and stood in front of a crowd of confused, curious, and concerned friends. There were whispers. Lots of them. "Where's Nolan? Is he okay? Are they okay?" I took the mic and stared out at the small crowd. Thank you all for being here. I know there's been a lot of confusion and questions. I'd like to answer some of them today. But first, I want to introduce someone. I stepped aside, and from behind me walked a woman named Maribel. She looked unsure, dressed simply in a lavender blouse and dark jeans. Her eyes flicked from the crowd to me to the baby in my arms. "This is Nolan's biological mother," I said. Gasps. Audible ones. A few people started whispering louder now. Nolan never told me he was adopted. He found out last year through a DNA kit. He tracked down Maribel and began building a relationship with her. Privately. Secretly. Over the last 6 months, he pulled away from our marriage, from this pregnancy, from me. And when I asked where he was during my baby shower, he told me he was at the hospital. Not for me, but to meet his real family. I didn't cry while saying it. I don't know how. I just felt empty. Maribel looked devastated. "I begged him to tell you the truth," she said softly. "I thought he had." The crowd at the garden was silent, paralyzed in that strange way people get when witnessing something intimate they're not sure they're meant to see. A few of them looked away, fidgeting with their coffee cups or sunglasses, pretending to check their phones. Others just stared. One of Nolan's old coworkers, Bethany, had her mouth slightly open like she was about to say something but forgot the words. I don't blame them. I wouldn't have known how to respond either. Maribel didn't linger long in front of everyone. She took a quiet step back after introducing herself, her hands twisting together, her eyes damp but not crying. I remember how small she looked despite being older, as if the weight of being a surprise guest made her shrink. I took a shaky breath and continued. "I had no idea," I said. "About the adoption. About any of it. He never mentioned it. Not once in all our years together. No hint. No conversation. Nothing." There were nods from the few people who had known Nolan for a while, mostly my friends, not his. A couple of them looked as stunned as I felt. I spent weeks wondering if I missed signs. If there were cracks I ignored. But the truth is, when someone wants to disappear from your life, they don't always slam the door. Sometimes they just stop answering it. And you stand there knocking, thinking maybe they're busy, or tired, or just didn't hear you. Until one day, you realize there's no one behind the door anymore. I think I said that more for myself than for anyone else. Someone offered a polite clap. A few others followed. It wasn't celebratory. It was supportive. A sort of collective acknowledgement of pain. Afterward, people came up to talk, quietly, carefully, like they didn't want to spook me. Some offered help. A couple of friends dropped off gift cards. One woman I hadn't seen since college pressed a small crocheted baby blanket into my hands and said, "I'm so sorry." Maribel lingered at the edge of the crowd. She didn't try to force a connection. She just waited until people dispersed and then came to say goodbye. "I wish things were different," she said. Her voice was steady, but her face gave away the regret. He wanted a clean slate. He talked about starting over. I told him he needed to face what he was leaving behind first. I asked her gently, "And what did he say?" She paused. "He said he didn't want to live a double life anymore. That he'd felt out of place his whole life and now finally knew why." I swallowed. "Did he mention the baby?" Maribel nodded slowly. "He said he wasn't ready to be a father. He said it wouldn't be fair to her." That part was cut. Not like a K&F, but like a slow tear in fabric you thought was strong. Over the next few weeks, everything that had been bubbling beneath the surface began to unravel. I found out through a mutual acquaintance that Nolan had moved in with a woman named Alina. She worked at a nonprofit in Buffalo and had been part of the same adoptee support group he joined a year prior. Apparently, they hit it off over coffee after one of the meetings and started seeing each other. She had also recently reunited with her biological family, and according to that same acquaintance, they really understood each other. Understanding. That was the word that haunted me the most. Because for years, I thought I understood Nolan. I knew how he took his coffee. I knew the names of his childhood dogs. I knew which movies made him cry and which smells reminded him of his grandmother's kitchen. But I didn't know this. And not just the adoption part. The real part. The part where he had chosen to replace everything we had with a new version of life that didn't include me, or our daughter. I filed for divorce less than 2 weeks after Juniper was born. There was no dramatic confrontation. No attempt at reconciliation. I left a voicemail explaining what I was doing, attached the paperwork to an email, and that was it. He signed. No contest. No message back. My parents finally called, after the birth, after the announcement, after everything. My mom's voice was flat. She said they didn't want to get involved in something so personal between husband and wife. My dad chimed in to say they still loved me, but they needed time to process things. Time. That's another word people use to avoid accountability. They didn't want time. They wanted distance. They didn't want to deal with the fallout of their daughter's life imploding, especially when it would mean picking sides. So instead, they stayed silent. It hurt more than I expected. Darla stayed, though. She moved into my guest room for a while, helped me with night feeds, cooked dinner, folded laundry, and told me, "You're stronger than you think. You just haven't seen it yet." One afternoon, about a month after Juniper's birth, I sat alone in her nursery rocking her to sleep. The walls were still painted the soft seafoam green we picked out together. The name banner Nolan helped hang still fluttered slightly whenever the window was open. I remember whispering to her, "I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry he left. I'm sorry it's just us." She didn't understand the words, of course. But she looked up at me with those dark, curious eyes, the same eyes Nolan has. And she smiled. That one smile felt like a spark in a pitch-black room. A week later, I received a letter in the mail with no return address. It was handwritten, Nolan's script. I knew it immediately. Slanted slightly to the right, neat but rushed, like he always wrote when he was uncomfortable. It wasn't long. Just a single page. But I must have read it 10 times. "Clara, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much. I don't expect forgiveness. I didn't plan for things to happen this way, but I handled it all wrong. I wasn't ready to be a father. And I felt like I'd been living someone else's life. Finding Maribel. It cracked something open in me. I needed to know where I came from. I needed to understand why I always felt distant. I didn't tell you because I didn't know how. I thought I could balance both worlds, but I couldn't. I don't blame you for anything. You were good to me. Better than I deserved. I hope Juniper grows up knowing she was loved. Even if I couldn't do it right." And that was it. No address, no number. Just a short, cold fragment of closure he must have written in a rush between his real-life obligations. The part that stood out most to me wasn't the apology or even the reference to Juniper. It was the way he said he felt like he'd been living someone else's life. I thought we had built that life together. But apparently, I'd just been renting space in it. I didn't write back. I didn't even know where to send it. Maribel called a few days after the letter arrived. She had heard from Nolan that I'd received it. He said you'd probably hate him forever, she said gently. I don't hate him, I told her. I just don't think I ever really knew him. There was a long pause on her end. Then she said something that stuck with me. You know, when he found me, I was scared. Not because I didn't want him, I did. But because I knew he was searching for something that couldn't be filled by anyone else. Not me. Not Alina. Not even you. And now a child is caught in that wake. I appreciated her honesty. She wasn't trying to defend him. She was just mourning him in a way I understood. He didn't die, but he disappeared in every way that matters. The holidays came. And with them, silence. No word from Nolan. Not even a card for Juniper's first Christmas. My parents sent a package, some generic baby clothes and a card with love from Grandma and Grandpa scrawled in my mom's tight cursive. No mention of the baby shower. No visit. Just a box, mailed from 3 hours away. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So I did both. Darla stayed over on Christmas Eve. We drank cocoa on the couch, surrounded by opened boxes and baby toys, while Juniper slept peacefully in her bassinet. The tree was small but full, paper stars, soft ornaments, and a felt angel Darla had stitched herself. Are you doing okay? She asked, watching me from the kitchen. I think I am, I said after a while. It's weird. I feel like the grief is still there, but it's quieter now. Like background noise. She nodded. It will come and go. But you'll keep moving. And she was right. A few weeks into the new year, I returned to work part-time. I'm an editor for a small publishing house in Rochester, mostly focused on nonfiction and memoirs. It felt oddly healing to read other people's stories after everything. Some were sadder than mine. Some were messier. But every one of them reminded me I wasn't alone. I began writing again, something I hadn't done in years. Not just journaling, but essays, fragments of thought, reflections on motherhood, identity, betrayal. I didn't know what I'd do with them yet, but putting the words down gave me something tangible to hold on to. Juniper started to laugh around the same time. Big, bright belly laughs that came out of nowhere and lit up the whole room. It didn't matter how tired I was or how heavy the day felt, her laughter cut through it. Every time I saw her smile, I reminded myself, he missed this. Maribel and I saw each other again, too. She would come by once every few weeks, never overstepping, never assuming a title, just showing up with soft blankets and tiny hand-knit socks. She never asked about Nolan unless I brought him up first. We mostly talked about books, babies, music, and little things that helped fill the silence. I asked her once, gently, if Nolan ever talked about coming back. She shook her head. He says he's at peace now. That he's happy. I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to. Maribel looked at me then, really looked. You know, Clara, I think he left you because you knew him too well. And he couldn't face that. It was the most painful compliment I'd ever received. In early March, I got a message request on Facebook from someone I didn't recognize. It was Alina. She said she wanted to talk. That she felt I deserved the truth. That she hadn't known the full story until after everything fell apart. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't reply right away. I needed to sit with the discomfort of it. I didn't sleep the night I got Alina's message. It wasn't fear that kept me awake. It was uncertain. Part of me wanted to delete it, block her, and move on. The other part, the part that still needed answers, hovered over the reply button like a moth circling a light it knew might burn. At 3:17 a.m., I finally wrote back, "You said you didn't know the full story. What didn't you know?" She replied the next morning. The message was longer than I expected. "When I met Nolan, he told me he was separated. That you were living separate lives and co-parenting, but that the relationship had been dead for a long time. He said you didn't want kids and that the pregnancy was complicated. I didn't ask too many questions at first. I should have. I only found out you were still married when he told me he was filing for divorce after Juniper was born. I confronted him. He said it was more complicated than it looked. Clara, I didn't know about the baby shower. I didn't know about the hospital call. I would never have gone along with any of that. I'm so sorry." My hands were shaking when I read it. Not because I was surprised, but because her words confirmed what I'd feared most: he'd been rewriting our story behind my back. I didn't reply for a few days. I let it sit, let it burn through me slowly like a delayed fever. I kept imagining what lies he must have spun to make me the villain in a story where he was escaping to freedom. Eventually, I responded. "Thank you for telling me. I don't blame you. But please understand, I need space. I'm raising a daughter." He walked out on. "I can't be in any part of his new life. I wish you well, but I'm closing this chapter." She respected that. No more messages followed. No likes, no comments, no lingering presence. She disappeared as quietly as she arrived. In the meantime, I started therapy. It was something Darla had gently nudged me toward for weeks, but I'd brushed it off, thinking I could tough it out. But after Alina's message, I knew I needed help sorting through it all. My therapist's name is Rena. She's in her mid-50s, warm but no nonsense, the kind of woman who doesn't flinch when you say something ugly out loud. The first session, I told her everything. From the baby shower, to the hospital call, to the voicemail from my father, to the letter from Nolan, and finally, the Facebook message. She listened. No interruptions, no judgment. Just silence and nods. When I finished, she leaned forward and said, "That's an incredible amount of betrayal. Not just from Nolan, but from people you should have been able to trust. And you're still standing. That says a lot." That session was the first time I allowed myself to really cry. Not the tight, quiet tears I shed in bed after Juniper fell asleep. I mean cry. Messy, chest-heaving, exhausting sobs that left me hollow and lightheaded. It felt like grief. But not for Nolan. For the version of my life I thought I had. Weeks turned into months. Juniper turned 6 months old. She started sitting up, babbling, reaching for things with her tiny determined hands. She loved music, any kind. I'd play lullabies on the speaker, and she'd rock slightly, like she was trying to dance. She especially loved when I sang off-key. Her laugh, that deep little chortle, was medicine. Sometimes, I'd catch myself staring at her and thinking, she has no idea what she saved me from. Not just Nolan. Not just betrayal. But the slow death of self I'd been living inside that marriage. The kind where you tell yourself things are fine because nothing catastrophic is happening. Because your partner brings you tea when you're sick or remembers your mom's birthday. But you stop noticing that you're shrinking. That your laughter is quieter. That you edit your thoughts before you speak. Nolan never yelled. He never cheated, until the end. He never hit. He never threatened. But he erased me long before he physically left. Maribel remained in Juniper's life, at my invitation. I set the boundaries early, no talking about Nolan unless I brought it up. No surprises. No pressuring Juniper to call her grandma. And Maribel, to her credit, honored all of it. She came once every couple of weeks, never empty-handed. Sometimes with a children's book from her childhood. Sometimes with a soup recipe she insisted was magic. She even babysat once or twice when I had to run errands. She never pushed. She just showed up. Quiet, consistent, and kind. One afternoon, while we sat on my porch watching Juniper crawl awkwardly across a blanket, Maribel turned to me and said, "You know, I envy her." I looked up, confused. She'll grow up with a mother who tells her the truth. Who doesn't disappear when things get hard. I didn't know what to say. So I just nodded. She understood more than I expected. A few days ago, I got another letter. This one wasn't from Nolan. It was from my mother. She wrote in long, looping cursive on floral stationery. Her words were careful, almost rehearsed, like she was trying not to say the wrong thing. "Clara, we made a mistake not coming to the baby shower. We didn't know how bad things really were. Your father and I didn't want to interfere. But that was cowardly. And I'm sorry. We'd like to meet Juniper. When and if you're ready." I stared at the letter for a long time. It didn't sting the way I thought it would. It didn't comfort me either. It just existed. A gesture. A crack in the wall, maybe. I haven't responded yet. I might. Eventually. But not out of guilt. Not out of obligation. Only if it feels right. A few months passed. Juniper was crawling fast now, trying to stand. My days were filled with tiny victories, her first tooth, her first mama, the way she clapped after her own sneeze like she was proud of herself. These small moments wrapped around my healing like gauze, slow, soft, steady. But even in the calm, something kept scratching at the back of my mind. Not bitterness. Not grief anymore. Justice. Not the kind with lawyers and courtrooms. Not the kind that punishes just for the sake of it. I wanted him to see what he gave up. Not through letters. Not through whispers from his mother. But face to face. My company was organizing a local storytelling night, kind of like the Moth Radio Hour, but on a smaller scale. It was part of a literary festival in downtown Rochester. We'd done it before, and I'd helped edit the submissions, but I never participated. This time I submitted anonymously. I wrote everything. About the baby shower. The phone call. The betrayal. The silence. The letter. Alina's message. The therapy. The baby. All of it. But I changed the names. Left out identifying details. Framed it as a reflection on abandonment, identity, and motherhood. The piece was selected. I invited Maribel. She came, sitting quietly in the third row, hands folded in her lap. I didn't tell her what I'd written. I wanted her to hear it fresh, like everyone else. The venue was small, a black box theater in the South Wedge, just a stage, a stool, and a mic. Maybe 60 people in the room. I didn't think Nolan would show up. But he did. I saw him walk in 10 minutes before the show started, standing in the back with his arms crossed, scanning the crowd. I guess curiosity outweighed cowardice. He took a seat in the far left corner. I didn't flinch. I didn't look at him again. When it was my turn, I walked up to the mic with my pages folded in half and my hands steady. Then I read. I read about being the backup plan. About planning a life with someone who slowly made you invisible. About receiving letters that only confirmed the emptiness you already knew was there. I read about watching your parents pick silence over support. And then I read about Juniper. About the light she brought into a dark room. About how, in losing everything, I found the most honest version of myself. I ended it like this: he didn't leave me for someone else. He left me for a version of himself that didn't have to be accountable. He walked away thinking freedom meant no responsibility. But here's the truth: freedom doesn't mean running from consequences. It means having the courage to face them. And motherhood didn't break me. It made it impossible to erase. When I looked up, the room was silent. Not uncomfortable silence, reverent silence. The kind that holds something sacred. Then the applause came. Not wild. Not theatrical. But strong. Real. I walked off the stage and didn't look at Nolan. Not once. He left before I came back out. Of course he did. But 2 days later, I got another letter. Handwritten. Shorter this time. You told the truth. I didn't think you'd ever say it out loud. I'm sorry again. I know it doesn't mean much. But you were always the strong one. I see that now. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. That was my revenge. Not rage. Not insults. Just truth, delivered with dignity. In front of an audience. He had to sit there and hear his failure spoken back to him, not with venom, but with clarity. And he had to do it silently, knowing he gave up something real. Now, when people ask if I'm angry, I tell them no. Because I didn't just survive Nolan. I transcended him. I raised my daughter in peace, not in bitterness. I turned betrayal into art. Silence into power. And one day, when Juniper is old enough to ask about her father, I'll tell her the truth. Not the bitter version. Not the cleaned-up fairy tale. But the version where her mother faced abandonment and turned it into purpose. As for my parents, they came around. Slowly. They started showing up more. Offering to babysit. Trying to learn. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. I let them in, but on my terms. That's how I live now, on my terms. Because no one else gets to decide my worth again. And that, more than anything, was the most satisfying ending of all.